Hi, second graders. Today for Reader's Workshop, we're going to talk about something that we can do to help us sound like an expert when we're reading our nonfiction books. Now, yesterday we talked about some strategies that we know that we can use as a nonfiction reader. And today I want to remind you of something that you guys already know about being a nonfiction reader. So today I want to teach you that nonfiction readers don't just read with explaining voices. They can also talk with explaining voices. So you can read and practice explaining the text to yourself as you go along using your own words. So then you can use that to explain the text to your partner when it's time to talk to them. So first, what I want to do is I want to model for you how I can do that. I'm going to use my teaching voice or my explaining voice to read to myself so that I can practice for when I read to my partner later. I also can jot down some notes for myself to help me remember. So when it's time to read to my partner, that I can share that information with them. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to show you this really cool book that I found on Reading A to Z about giant pandas. Now, I love pandas. I think they're so cute and so cuddly. So I decided that I wanted to read this book to you today. So I want you to listen to how I read this book in an explaining voice, and then also how I can write down some notes for myself to remember the important information. So my table of contents, I know I'm going to meet the giant panda. I'm going to learn about food and feeding, the life cycle, and its survival. So meet the giant panda. Giant pandas are among the most loved animals in the world. Members of the bear family, giant pandas are easily recognizable because of their thick black and white fur. Wild giant pandas remain in only one place on Earth, the forest-covered mountains of western China. They are so rare and endangered that they have become a symbol of the effort to protect the Earth's animals. So now I can use some of my information that I know from this book to help myself sound like an expert. And I can write down some notes for myself to remember to use when I'm explaining in my teaching voice to my partner later. So I see that the word endangered is bolded, so I know that that's an important vocabulary word. So I'm going to write down on my Post-it note, endangered. And I know that that means that these animals are in risk of being extinct. So that means that there's not that many of them left in the world, so that when I'm reading to my partner, I can say to them like this. So they're rare and they're endangered because that means that there's a risk of them going extinct. There's not that many of them left in the world, so that's why we need to take such good care of them. I'm going to keep going, and I'll let you listen to how I can use my explaining voice on the next page too. Food and feeding. The name Panda comes from the language of Nepal, a country near China. Panda means bamboo eater, and bamboo makes up almost all of the panda's diet. Bamboo, a kind of grass that grows extremely tall, is plentiful in the cold, damp, high mountains where pandas live. Bamboo is low in the nutrients that pandas need for energy. For this reason, pandas must eat an amazing amount of bamboo in order to get enough nutrients. An adult panda spends as many as 16 hours a day eating up to 18 kilograms or 40 pounds of bamboo. Do you know pandas do not hibernate like other bears do? They must eat year-round to get enough nutrients. So when I'm explaining this to my partner in my teaching voice or my expert voice, I can say like this. So did you know that because these pandas, they eat food that's not that high in nutrients, I mean, there's not that much energy in the food to give them, that they have to eat all day long in order for them to be healthy and stay alive, right? So they have to eat for 16 hours a day. Can you imagine eating for 16 hours a day? I'd be so full. These bears are so big that they have to eat almost 40 pounds of bamboo. So you see how I use my teaching voice or my explaining voice to talk to my pretend partner? Now today what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you're reading out loud to yourself while you're reading your nonfiction books from your book baggie. And I want you to use your explaining voice to sound like an expert, right? You can always write down notes for yourself. We've done that before. You can jot it down on a Post-it note or a piece of paper so that when it's time for you to read to your partner, who might be your mom, your dad, your sister, maybe even your dog, right? When it's time for you to read with your partner, you can give them that information to sound like an expert. So your job today is to set your timer for 25 minutes and to choose a book from your book baggie that's a nonfiction text. You need to read your book using an explaining voice to sound like an expert so that when it's time for you to read to your partner, you can sound like you know exactly what you're talking about with your explaining voice. So remember, you're going to choose a nonfiction book. You're going to read it with an explaining voice. You're going to set your timer for 25 minutes. Once that timer is up, then you're going to go find a partner to read with and read for another 15 minutes. Off you go.